So I'm Lisa Witter. I'm the CEO of the Apolitical Foundation. Thank you for coming. Yeah, thank you. I'll get some woos. Yes, there you go. It helps to have friends. Let me put it that way. And you're here for a topic about politicians. How many of you have been to an event that talks about politicians this week? Is a few of you. Okay, I want to talk to you because I have not, which is kind of interesting because they're a little bit important to the mix about how we're going to address the climate crisis. So I want to start off with you. First, I want you to wave. I don't know where the camera's at. Where's the camera? Let's wave to all the people. It's back there, I think. Let's turn around and wave to all the people who saved on their carbon footprint. Thank you very much, and aren't in the room with us today. We're going to try to get you in a little bit later. So I want to start off with you. So I want you in a word to say the state of politics today. I'll give you a second, and I'm just going to point at you, and you're going to shout it out. And if you don't know, just pass. And if you say a sentence, I'll be angry. A word, okay? A word. Divided. Problematic. Problematic.
Vitriol.
Vitriol.
Regressive.
Regressive.
Chaotic.
Chaotic.
Polarizing.
Polarizing. Bad.
Obsolete.
Obsolete? Ooh. No.
Fragmented.
Fragmented.
More important than ever.
More important than ever. Robin? Jeez. She's a friend, too. Jeez.
Depressing.
Depressing.
Poor.
Pole.
Poor.
Poor.
Broken.
Broken. Destructive.
Dismal.
Dismal.
Slow.
Hi. Slow. Julia.
Depressive.
Depressive.
Chaotic.
Chaotic.
Positive.
Passive.
Tumult.
Tumult.
Antagonistic.
Antagonistic.
Stack.
Stack.
Stuck.
Stuck.
Stuck. Victorious.
Victorious. Ooh, wow.
Where is he?
Yeah, wherever you're at, we're going there, yeah? Next.
Negative.
Negative. Unawareness. Anyone else? Do we hear from you? Passive. Anyone else? Okay, so I'm going to do the next round, which is in a word, how are we going to address the climate crisis with the word you just said? So if you said stuck, then what's the word that helps us get unstuck, okay? What's the word? This is the action that needs to be taken. A little bit harder, so I'll give you a second. How are we going to get through the climate crisis with the state that you just said? Suki.
Hope.
Hope.
Presence.
Presence.
Listening.
Listening.
Inner.
Inner.
Bridging.
Bridging.
Community.
Community. Positive. Rebirth.
Connection.
Connection.
Investment.
Investment. Faith.
Action.
Action. No clue. Not personal.
Embeddedness.
Embeddedness. Agency.
Togetherness.
Together.
Responsibility.
Responsibility. Leadership.
Alignment.
Alignment. Empowerment. Daring. Proactive. Diligent.
Resilient.
Resilient. Innovation.
Adaptive.
Adaptive. Dialogue.
Empathetic.
Empathetic. Sorry, what did you say in the back? Awareness. Positive. Turnout. Yeah, this guy's practical back there, the tactician. Basically, what we just did is we went from dark to light, and a lot of it, Jan and Jamie, was about the inner development work. So that's what we're here today to talk about. Sort of where are politicians in the spectrum? How are they doing? And what do we need to do as leaders to support them and ourselves in the inner development work? So I just want to, I'll get back to you in just a second. So I want to talk about the job. Any politicians in the room or former politicians? Anyone? You can raise it high. Thank you for your service. Raise it high. Yeah. How many of you are thinking about running for office? A few, two, not as many. Okay. So I want to talk about the job of being a politician today. It's easy, right? No, it's very hard. Some very brave activists are out in the street, angry at our politicians, I understand. And there are politicians bravely facing threats every day. And the job of being a politician may be as hard as it's ever been. I don't have longitudinal data on this, but basically last year, 2022, 90 politicians were killed running for office in Mexico. 70 politicians were killed in the Philippines. Around the world, death threats are up. Violence against women, there's some statistics that say that 80% of politicians get online threats on a regular basis, including their family, about rape and other forms of physical violence. A dear friend of mine was killed right before Brexit, Joe Cox. This is not easy, right? At a time when we need citizens engaging in politics more than ever, politicians, I wouldn't say are afraid, but are a bit nervous about how do we actually engage. Hi, Wendy. How we actually engage. So it's a tough state for them, and sort of how do we help them, and how can they be the bold, brave, courageous leaders we need to get us through this climate transition when things are harder for them than ever before. So we're going to hear from some of the politicians that are facing threats. When we announced Haswood to speak on this panel, she personally online, and we got threats for having a politician talking about this. This is real every single day. So with that, I want to introduce, Jan, you can come up on the stage. Daniella is the CEO and founder of the Leadership Now project, which I'm proudly a member of. It's a collection, coalition, group, dynamic business leaders saying, we need to protect democracy and make it work better for the people. It's a membership organization. So could you give a few marks on why are you on this panel and why is this important?
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. Great to see everyone here, and thanks to Lisa and your team and the whole team at Apolitical for pulling this together and for your incredible work on raising awareness here. And I was reflecting on, in 2015, I was over at the UN in the main chamber when the Sustainable Development Goals were signed as part of the US delegation. I was serving in government at the time, and President Obama, heads of state around the world committed to these ambitious goals. And I've reflected, it feels like a universe away at that time relative to where we are now. And I've thought about okay, what did we get right with the SDGs? What did we get wrong? We obviously have, as a global community, haven't made the kind of progress that we had all hoped to make, and what underpins that. And I think, for those of you who haven't memorized the goals, they're 17. They're beautifully designed, the kind of visuals of each of them. But at the end, there were two goals that sometimes might have been a little bit left off, but it was governance was goal 16, and goal 17 was partnership for the goals. So the suggestion that to achieve them, you were going to need government and business and all of society to kind of implement. And I've often thought that in the end, those were really the most important. They were gating, they weren't the last things you needed to do. They were actually the first things you need to do in order to advance, to address climate change, to address hunger, et cetera. You need governance and ultimately politicians who make decisions to advance those issues. And you need also business and a private sector that is going to be part of delivering on that. And so I think what the SDGs was a policy exercise in many ways, and that was a good thing, that we are now in the midst of a very political exercise, not only related to the SDGs, but into the future of all of our countries. And over the last 6 years, I've been focused on what does implementation of democracy really look like in the US, because without a functioning democracy, without political leaders that are willing to do hard things and take on the challenges, we know that none of these things are possible. So I think that appreciation has built, but as you all reflected in Lisa's very kind of hopeful, but first worrying set of asks to you about how you're feeling about politics, that we really we're stuck. We're not figuring out how to build a political culture that enables people to deliver, and we're not supporting the politicians who are at the center of that. So I think this effort and really focusing on how do you build a resilient set of political leaders, how do you support the ones who are good? There are certainly no small number of politicians who are not doing the right things, but there are amazing politicians who are doing the right things, and there are amazing business leaders who are trying to do the right thing. So I think really, how do we elevate those who are doing the right thing? How do we support them? And I really just also commend all of those who've been part of that fight, who have served in office, and look forward to the conversation. So thanks again.
Thank you, Daniella. Thank you for your partnership. I'm going to send the mic over to our other partner. Actually, I think you have a mic on. To our other partner, Jan Artem and Henriksson, who is really pioneering with everyone engaged the inner development goals, which is really again, like the popcorn that came out of what we need as leaders, both as individuals, but particularly in this instance, we're talking about political leaders. So give some framing for why this is important to you all.
So to start with, we're an NGO. We're a framework that is co-created by thousands of people, scientists, experts in human development and in sustainability. And we work with governments and big organizations to accelerate towards the SDGs. To start with, I'd like to say maybe the biggest challenge that we're facing as humanity is that we're framing the problems in a wrong way. We try to tackle climate change, we try to tackle inequality as it was a technical challenge, a complex but technical challenge. Making a heart surgery is very complex, but there is a road how you can learn how to do that, become a doctor, and then do that. And it doesn't require you changing as a person in that process. Building an airplane is a complex technical challenge, but we know how to do that. It doesn't require change of us. Solving climate change, creating better politicians, creating better societies is an adaptive challenge. It requires us, leaders, individuals, but also especially politicians, to grow and develop, be better at collaborating, adapting together, and making the decisions necessary. And it's first now that we're starting to realize this fully, what scientists have been telling us for decades. And Costa Rica was the first country to adopt the IDG framework. They've been best in class on some of the SDGs. And now we see the US government, just in a few weeks, there will be quite a lot of progress happening in how US is viewing climate change and how the inner will, for the first time in the history of US government, be part in how we work with climate change.
Thank you. And why this is so important for us is we have a network of what we call political leadership incubators around the world. People who are activists in their communities saying, I want to go inside of politics and make a change. And as part of all of our programs is inner development work, right? How do you do that inner development work to do the policy work, to do the collaboration? So thank you very much. Speaking of inner development, it would be a bit hypocritical for us if we provided no inner development work to all of you online and people here. So Jamie Bristow, I'm going to ask you to lead us in a moment.
Sure. So to properly land together here and prepare ourselves to be sort of receptive and open to what we might be hearing, let's just ground ourselves with the sensations of your feet on the floor and the bum on the chair. So feeling perhaps the heels, the balls of the feet, the toes, the sit bones, and appreciating the support that the chair and the ground are offering you in this moment. Perhaps then turning the attention to the feeling of breathing. The in-breath and the out-breath. Knowing that throughout the day and the busyness of this climate week, these anchors are always available to us. The grounding, the settling support of feeling our contact with the floor or the chair. And the relaxation of the out-breath, the energization of the in-breath. And as the mind settles perhaps a little bit, becoming aware and acknowledging any emotions that are around, a mood that perhaps is coloring your perceptions, and any thoughts, judgments, and other activity of the mind. So this grounding, breathing, acknowledging and accepting of what we're bringing with us helps us to be more open and more curious, about our experience. If your eyes have been closed, opening them and coming back to the space together, and back over to you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody.
As we're going through the next little time together, could you put in your mind that you're a politician with a clear idea of what needs to happen, but a very difficult decision to make about how to make it happen? Just kind of let that sit in there. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to my extraordinary colleague. We both wore green jackets today, in part for Climate Week, but in part, that's just what we do. Kimberly McArthur, she's the COO of the Apolitical Foundation, and she's been leading the work on the mental well-being of politicians. So Kim.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's fantastic to be here, and Jamie, thank you for that grounding mindfulness exercise. I thought that was really fantastic. So we've been looking at mental well-being in politics and of politicians. And the reason that we have been doing this and think that it's important, I think one of our interviewees in our research said it the best: if I'm well, I can do good politics. Politicians have oversight over approximately 40% of GDP. That's how much governments spend on themselves. So this is an important issue. How are they spending it? How are they making those decisions? So over the last 9 months, we have been investigating mental well-being among political leaders of all levels across the world. We've interviewed just over 30, we've surveyed just under 100, and we've also spoken to other experts, so political scientists, occupational therapists, occupational psychologists, and some of these political leadership incubators that Lisa mentioned as well, who help to get people into office, just to get a global snapshot of the state of affairs. So we've looked into what is the state of mental well-being among political leaders, what are the influences of the job, and also how does their mental well-being affect their ability to do that job. And then part of what we've been trying to find around the world is all of the initiatives and all of the supports and resources that already exist to help politicians essentially to do their job as best they can. I think we have something represented in the room today, but spoiler alert, there's not that many around the world. We've also tried to assemble the sort of leading thinkers in this space. It's a really small space, you might not be surprised to learn. There isn't a lot of research on this topic, so we're really indebted to our advisory council for the years of work some of them have already done and for the guidance that they're giving us in our research going forward. It's stuck. Here we go. So into some of our findings. Maybe this is intuitive, but we sort of want to get this out there. There's evidence behind this, that the job of being a politician, as it's currently formulated in a lot of places, is detrimental to your mental well-being. So the WHO has a list of psychosocial risks that come out in the workplace. The job of politician ticks all of the boxes. It has all of the risks. So for the first time ever, we've used a really robust scale. It's called the Warwick-Edinburgh scale that measures mental well-being. It's been used around the world. It's been used with lots of different professions already. It's been used in countries, so Denmark and the UK have used it on their whole populations. But it's never been used on politicians before. So we've started this and really hope that this allows us to start comparing mental well-being across different professions. And what we've found with our survey respondents that answered this scale is 41% have low or very low mental well-being. And if we compare that to some of these other high-stress professions that you can see here, they're not faring very well. And we really hear politicians telling us that they're miserable and they're exhausted. And this is from the Deputy Minister for Climate Change in Wales. What we're also hearing in our interviews and in the surveys is that many politicians feel they're in this sort of hyper-vigilant state all of the time. They're always on edge. So that's really this fight, flight or freeze mode. That's really concerning because we know from many studies that if you're in that state, your ability to think creatively, your ability to think constructively or to process complex information is narrowed and limited. And if you think about climate policy, that's exactly the skill set that we're needing from our political leaders, among other important topics as well. One thing that we've seen is the job's changing. And sort of Lisa mentioned, maybe it's the hardest it's ever been. There are some aspects of the job that haven't changed for decades, but some key areas really have. And this is causing a lot of tension for politicians. So these are longer hours, more scrutiny, and as Lisa mentioned, online harassment, violence, and in-person harassment and violence as well. Social media, as we heard from many of the people we spoke to, is a real opportunity to connect with your constituents, but it also carries with it this huge burden that you're going to get trolled, that your family's going to be attacked, but also it's creating this expectation that you respond to everything immediately. So it's really quickening the pace of the job as well, and that's causing a stress on the mental well-being of the people doing this job. So I think despite the hurdles and the barriers, we're really encouragingly seeing more diverse politicians run for office and win. But what that means is we're seeing people who go into these spaces and these structures that weren't designed with them in mind. So that is also creating extra tension for those people. And in our report that we're going to release on the 8th of November about our insights, we're going to draw out some of the different influences that different people from different underrepresented groups experience, and see how there are different interventions or different ideas that might be able to help them as well. I think politician has to be one of the least admired professions in the world. I used to be a lawyer, so now I'm in politics and I'm kind of ticking all the boxes. But here you can see in the US, politicians are considered to be one of the most overpaid, that and with professional sports people. In the US as well, we have state legislators who are working part-time jobs with full-time problems, as one of our interviewees said. They're getting paid minimum wage if you work it out over the year, and they don't have health insurance. So the reality really doesn't fit this perception, and it's really taking a toll on the people that are doing the job. And again, thinking about underrepresented groups, if you think about women or people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, they're feeling this even more. So we are very concerned about what this means for not just the people in office, but those considering running. Why would you do that if you're not going to earn very much money, you're going to get harassed? Almost 70% of the people that we surveyed and pretty much everyone we spoke to wants more resources, or access to more resources. And the top 3 things they were looking for are mentor programs, peer-to-peer support networks, and training. These feelings that they have no idea what they're doing are pretty prevalent. So training for skills and knowledge. But I guess my last point, and I really want to emphasize this, is that almost everyone we spoke to, almost everyone we interviewed, talked about the honour that they have. They know they are privileged to serve their communities. They're setting out to make the world a better place. And they really just want these capacities, these resiliencies, in order to do a better job to serve their citizens. And I think that's really encouraging. It gives us hope that there's this opportunity. If we can amplify the parts of the role that are inspiring, then we can address this issue. So our report's out on the 8th of November. Watch this space. We'll send you all an email so you'll be able to read it in detail. So thank you.
So if I can bridge us back during Climate Week, why this is so important. One thing we know is that when you get more women as parliamentarians, there's research, you get better climate policies, more stringent climate policies. Now let me connect that to the fact that 1 out of every 6 women who are elected to office leave before their mandates open because of threats of violence. So here we have the extraordinary push of women and underrepresented groups. Indigenous people know how their land should be taken care of. Folks from their community know what needs to be done, and they are the ones that are being pushed out the fastest. This is urgent. If we want to solve climate, we have to figure out how to do this. And I just want to thank Tatiana Mumbi. She's a young politician from Kenya. She's online right now, if we can wave. She's one of these young people against all odds coming in and really, really pushing for change. So thank you. And we really want to support you in what you're doing, Tatiana. So I want to bridge then from 1 out of 6 leave. It's bad for all men and women. It's just worse for women right now, particularly underrepresented groups. How important this is to climate policy. To you, Jan, about how the work of the Inner Development Goals, how this can be part of the solution.
Thank you. I got touched by what you said around females getting threats. I was born in Soviet Union, in Ukraine, a very masculine, heroic culture, both Ukraine and Russia. And if you look at the science, it's quite clear that women are more emotionally mature than men. You know, they tell us this when we are growing up, like, but they never tell us, like, now you actually caught up. Because we never really do, you know? So those people measuring emotional maturity at Harvard, Susan Cook-Reuter, Bob Keegan, they find this over and over again. And this is why I'm such a strong feminist. I think equality really matters. It matters for the climate. It matters for some of the most complex social issues we're facing. So how do we do this? My entry point working with the Inner Development Goals have been 12 years as a management consultant in management training, working with some of the top companies in the Nordics and in globally, Spotify, IKEA, Henriksson. But I realized that what the managers, top managers are getting in commercial companies, we're not giving to the politicians. And that is a risk of our democracy. It's an existential risk that is huge. If we look into the science of human development, the IDG is a framework. I'm going to give you some background around it. I'm going to go through it, and then I'm going to say what can be done next. And if there are some people in the back who are willing to take some of these and distribute, so you can also see it while we speak about it. And online, you can find it at innerdevelopmentgoals.org/framework, so you can see it as we're speaking about it. We asked the question what skills we collectively need to develop in order to increase our chances of reaching the SDGs. We had Peter Senge from MIT, Bob Keegan, Amy Edmondson, many other global scientists with us who put their own frameworks and egos aside and co-created the IDG framework. Now we're working with different organizations in promoting human development, and not any human development, but the skills most needed to solve complex problems. And Google, of course, IKEA, Novartis, many others are partners, and now states are catching up and starting to work with this. And just like with the SDGs, we need one language. We need to share the same language to be able to speak to each other. So we found 5 dimensions. Jamie started us off very beautifully in the being dimension. And by the way, the symbols that you can see here, it's the same company that done the SDG work, the beautiful 17 symbols who are helping us do the communication for the IDGs and the symbols for all the skills. And in the being section, except for meditation, there is a lot of other things we could do, like clarifying our personal values and purpose. There is so much good science in the ACT domain, acceptance commitment training, where we can help people with very simple exercises at large scale to define their personal values, what they care about, and think how they want to contribute to society, having a personal purpose. That can be done in 3 hours. There is good science showing that 2 workshops with 3 hours each can help people become more resistant towards stress, become more ethical, less corrupt, and more resilient with less burnout. Why are we not doing it? Spotify is doing it at all people they onboard. IKEA is working heavily with this. And there are organizations like Great Place to Work that actually measure how is the culture in the different companies, and some companies end up top of those lists, and young students from elite universities, where I also teach, want to apply to those companies. Who wants to apply to become a politician? Is that a great place to work? We underinvest in our politician. If we look in this thinking dimension, that is the second of 5 dimensions, and you have some different skills there, there is a skill called long-term visioning and orientation. We're stuck in thinking in quarters, years, and we underestimate the complexity that is a bit further ahead. And there are ways in which we can learn system thinking and become much more long-term orientated. Peter Senge has been working with this. How many have read The Fifth Discipline when it came out in the 90s? Some of us a bit older. Books sold in 5 million copies. We've known how to do this for 30 years, and there's a huge knowing-doing gap. We don't do it. And honestly, we don't have time to wait the 20 or 30 years it usually takes from a scientist that knows methods that actually work towards them starting to be implemented in private sector only. If we are to have a chance with SDGs, we need to start working with that now. In the relating dimension, how we relate to each other, we can work on appreciation, gratitude, but also there are exercises like bubble hopping where you can build empathy, compassion, and humility in just taking one lunch. A lunch with a person with very different political views than your own, and instead of being judgmental, you practice curiosity, open questions, and humility. Emma Stenström, researching at Stockholm School of Economics, she's now at Stanford. Teaching this practice costs nothing. And I challenge you to put out on your LinkedIn, wherever you are on the political spectrum, think of somebody you think are just crazy and nuts. They just don't get anything. And then just write, do I have any LinkedIn friends or Facebook friends who actually votes for this party or have these thoughts? And then invite them to a really nice restaurant. And see if you can work on your curiosity, empathy, and humility. And that will make you a better leader, and it will help you relate better to your children, family, siblings that you can't get along with, and navigate complexity better. Last two dimensions, collaborating. Amy Edmondson, who I mentioned, has put a lot of time and effort in thinking how do we build psychological safety. Lisa, you've done a great work in helping us do a check-in with one word. Everybody saying something actually increases the chances of us collaborating better. There are so many simple things that doesn't cost anything, like a check-in that takes 5 minutes in the beginning of a meeting that could be implemented everywhere with zero cost and a lot of good effects that are just not being done today. And the last, with acting. If you look at climate change, the emotion that we need most is hope. And in framing climate change as an adaptive challenge that includes us all, it gives us actually agency and hope. Because as I was sitting and having dinner in Stockholm just 2 days ago, and I'm part of the problem. I flew to New York Climate Week from Stockholm. This is an adaptive challenge. Maybe I could have done this differently. We're all part of this problem. And Susan Valzunas, top manager at IKEA, said, not everybody at IKEA can work with carbon offset, but everybody can become more complexity aware. Everybody can become more compassionate. And through that, we give people hope and agency. So I invite you all to join us if you like. We have a yearly summit. It's on the 11th to 13th of October. Through Apolitical, you will be able to get free digital tickets if you like to do that. Please, let's get some politicians to join. There will be people from UNDP, ministers of equality, education, and many others coming together. And the US government, when they will release their report on climate change, we know this now, the inner dimension will be there. And this will start shifting the collective consciousness in including the IDGs, including the inner development as a crucial part for our democracies and not a nice to have when you're done with everything else in your careers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. If I can call our panelists up to the stage. I'll vacate. So we're just going to have a quick fire round panel discussion now with some really, I think, wonderful leaders who have helped us in our work in lots of different ways. So if I can introduce you to Representative Christina Haswood, who is a state legislator in Kansas in the 10th District, and she's also House Minority Policy Chair. And a member of our advisory council for this research that we're doing. Next to her is Sorsan Shebly, who is the former Berlin state delegate to the German Federation and was Secretary for Civic Engagement and International Affairs. And very relevant for our discussion is the author of a recent book that's come out called Loud, Why Hate Speech is Real Violence and How We Can Stop It. Currently just in German, so for all you German readers out there, but watch this space for the English translation coming out soon. Next to Sorsan is Carlo Angeles, who is, among many things, member of the Peruvian government's National Climate Change Commission, a former Metropolitan Council member for Lima, and a youth advocate for climate and SDGs. And of course, we have Jamie Bristow here, who is here on behalf of the Inner Development Goals, but in a previous role was also working on the Mindfulness Initiative, which is something very interesting in this space as well. So welcome everybody, thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights and your experience with us. I'm going to ask you the first question. We're here at Climate Week, obviously. Can you tell me, and I'm going to take a page out of Lisa's book, in one word, followed by a sentence, I'll give you that, why mental well-being, the inner development of political leaders is so important for climate policy and for citizens in general. So, Christina, if I can start with you.
Yeah, I think compassion is definitely a big word that would go a long way in politics because something has not happened to you currently or historically. Having that empathy and compassion for others when making these decisions is really what we need in our current political climate.
Thanks. Sorsan.
One word would be resilience in order to be able to tackle the huge challenges we're confronted with. We need to be resilient, and by being resilient, I don't mean that we should lose empathy, because it's very hard to get all the hate all the time and to stay empathetic and to not, like, if you're distant, if you feel like you don't want them to touch you, you don't want them to break you, right? When you get all the hate every time, it's very hard to stay there and to still be vulnerable. So resilience is one of the most important things I would say that helped me to not let them, when I say them, to me, it's the far-right networks and the Nazis all over the place that attack me, to not let them break me.
Thank you. Carlo.
I would also go with resilience, because if we want to address climate change, we need to build resilient societies. And we will not be able to do that without resilient political leaders. And you know something, when you're in office or when you are in any kind of leadership positions, there will be a lot of people that will say you that what you are doing is impossible. And you have actually to be resilient to thrive through that situation and continue to advocate, in this case, for climate change.
In a word, agency. So I think that our agency, our ability to create and resist change, is underpinned by our mental health, our well-being, and our inequalities and capacities. It is underdeveloped relative to our human potential. And it's also, increasingly undermined by our technology, by the thing we carry around with us all the time, short-circuiting our attention, regulation, our free will, and also our kind of culture and media landscape. So underpinned, underdeveloped, and undermined.
Thank you. So we've got compassion, resilience, agency. What can we do from your perspective to help build these within political leaders, to better support political leaders in their role so they can do the best they can for their citizens?
I would say humanize. So a lot of times I get asked, how can I communicate with the other side of the aisle? How can I get my point across? I would say just ask. A lot of my colleagues are in their 60s and 70s, so I say ask them about their grandkids. That's a lot what I ask. How was your weekend? How was your summer? I saw little Jimmy, started high school. When you start at that base level of a basic human connection, and build those relationships forward, similar to someone had different political ideologies than me, then we can have that sense of stability, of respect built in with each other, and then start problem solving. I say we, as politicians, recognize issues, but we have different avenues and solutions to get there, right? So when we can work together and collaborate, that would make better policy for our constituents.
Thank you. I have to say, in our research with interviewing people, the thing that pretty much everyone said was they just wish that the general public remembered that they were people, that they were human. So really feeling this dehumanization. Sorsan.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that we need to do. First, one very important thing is to show solidarity with people that are doing the job, like that are standing in the front lines being attacked on a daily basis, like I guess the three of us are. Just show that you appreciate what we are doing and show solidarity. Maybe like my focus is cyber violence. Like there is no day in my life without actually being bullied or attacked in social media. I'm very active on Twitter, X, so you can imagine how toxic that is. As a Muslim female politician in Germany, it's very hard. So showing solidarity and appreciating what we're doing. The second thing is be aware of how important it is to have people doing this job, right? I know so many young women who want to run and who tell me, you know, we're seeing what you are experiencing and I don't want to do it. And this is a threat to our democracy. If people are deciding not to run for office, it's one of the biggest threats to our democracy. So talk about it, be aware. Having like discussions like this is so important in order to encourage young people. I mean, we're talking about us, but young people in school already are experiencing death threats. If their fight for climate change, like climate change activists, young people are being attacked heavily, getting death threats. This is not normal. And we're not talking about it. So in order to have people run, we have to talk about the whole thing of mental well-being, how important it is. It's nothing fashionable. It's not a nice to have. It's something that we need to tackle and to speak openly about. And the third thing is, because it's cyber violence, it's not only important to show solidarity and digital civil courage, I call it in my book. We need to tackle the tech social media platforms, right? So Google, Meta, and all of these platforms, they're making money by triggering hate and emotions. So we need to also work on that. I mean, I did talk to Meta and all these people, but it's very hard. So we need to have legislation in order to regulate social media platforms to not let them make money with the hate and destroy our democracies, basically.
Thank you.
I will also go with solidarity, but specifically, I think, or something that I would like to add on, is that we should acknowledge the huge amount of pressure that politicians are under. And, well, pressure, it's a good thing. Citizens have to watch for their elected authorities. They have to demand things from their elected authorities. But these demands can, if they are not managed properly, if this pressure, if it's not managed properly, can lead into polarization. And polarization is a huge, huge threat for society and, of course, for the mental well-being of society and the politicians themselves. So I would say that we should be very active. We should, as citizens, demand our elected authorities for immediate action, but we should be very careful that these demands do not end up in polarization. And I also want to share something that is very close to me. Some people that inspire me to run for office, that actually were my mentors when they were in office and when I was in office, they had to put a stop in their careers because they were struggling with mental health problems related of being in office. And that really impacted me because I was about to continue my political career, and my own mentors told me that they were taking a break. And I completely agree with you. This is a huge threat to democracy because I think that there are a lot of people that are very valuable to society that can do a lot of change, but unfortunately, they are under a lot of threats, a lot of stress, and that leads them, finally, society, of not being able to get those inspiring people into office. So I would just finish by adding that I firmly believe that we as a society have to be very, very, we have to demand our politicians for immediate actions, but we should also demand them not to engage in polarizing debates and actually demand them to engage in dialogue, in multi-party dialogue, that will actually lead us to a sustainable development.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've heard that people tend to think that politicians are overpaid. And if a parliament is to put on a training program for them to support their mental health or develop their inner capacities that we've heard is so important. Because remember, like, we have millions of people depending upon the cognitive and emotional and relational capacities of a very small group. Like, it's in the national interest in so many ways that they are supporting to be at their best in their work. But when that's put on, the media and the public are often critical of that. They see it as a kind of indulgence somehow. And we need to move from that critique or even tolerance to demanding it. I think that's something we can do. We can sort of try and balance that out and saying, no, I really want you to go on this training program. What training have you done, my representative, to be equal to the challenges of the world and to vote and act on my behalf? Who are you to do that? And as a good news story, Kim mentioned my other role. I spent 8 years directing the Mindfulness Initiative, which came out of the British Parliament, a kind of think tank that supported the all-party parliamentary group on mindfulness. Now, for 10 years, and now there's been a training program in Parliament, and initially they were scared, politicians were scared of taking part, because they thought the Daily Mail, our right-wing press would criticise this. But over time it's passed the Daily Mail test, it's been covered by them a few times. And now they're very proud to talk about it. And last week we published a report summarising 10 years of mindfulness in British politics, showing the benefits to personal, interpersonal, and even cultural dimensions. And they say mindfulness and compassion and things that can be trained diligently over years help them to disagree better. Disagreement is necessary, debate is healthy, but the polarisation that Carlo talked about isn't necessary, actually. Effective polarisation, which is how much you hate or distrust the other person, rather than how much you disagree with them, can be reduced. There's evidence showing that mindfulness can do that. So there are evidence-based methods. They've been tested in tough political environments, and we need to support politicians by demanding that of them.
Thank you so much. I think this idea of paying politicians more or training them not being very popular is worrying. If you think about going to a doctor, you don't want that doctor to not have any training, to not have any education, and they make important decisions that affect your life as well. My final question, I'll just do another quick fire round, and Jamie, I'll start with you this time. And kind of moving on from this point of demand, how can we get more people kind of behind this issue or aware of this issue or making these demands? What do you think?
Well, we can make the case sort of theoretically, as I've just done, talk about emotional, cognitive and relational capacities, or we can get people to try it themselves. And actually, if you taste the benefits, if you've been supported by someone to improve your mental health and therefore improve your life and work, if you've been supported to develop compassion or mindfulness, people say sometimes mindfulness isn't taught, it's caught. And you want to kind of like, deeply annoying actually when you get the kind of evangelical people who really want to pass it on to you. But if people sense it themselves, then I think, and so that means supporting them, public policies that make inner development and mental health a civilizational priority.
Thank you. Carlo?
I would say that, and I would love to go back to what you said about humanizing politicians, because you see, politicians are human beings like you, like me, that they face their own personal struggles, their own work-related stress. And research has shown us that when you are under a stressful situation and you are under a lot of scrutiny and you are actually in a very tense environment, you will not lead to the best performance. And I think that we have to make the citizens realize that we want our politicians to be or to have the best performance while they are in office. So I think that that way we can actually show them that investing in mental health for our politicians will pay off for society overall. And that, like you said, might not be a very popular concept in the beginning, because who will want to pay more benefits for the politicians? I know it might sound crazy if we put it that way, but we should reframe it in a way that if we invest in the mental health of our politicians, that will pay off in their decisions, and that will pay off in society overall.
Thank you. We have to be
Very fast.
pretty
Okay.
snappy, but over to you, Sauce.
Yes. Some people tell me if you're not that loud, just shut your mouth. Maybe then the hate will be less. So this is something we have to overcome, and we also have to realize that the attacks on climate change activism and on politicians dealing with climate change is orchestrated, is globally, is organized. It's not one person attacking me for doing for dealing with progressive issues like diversity or climate change. It's globally orchestrated, and the answer can only be globally organized. We have to do it together. Germany, with the United States, with other countries. We need a global network in order to tackle this issue. Alone, we will lose because the others are perfectly organized.
Very practical. I love it. Christina, final word from you.
So it was mentioned quite a times in the panel of the polarization of politics and the way that people engage. There is a reason why, there's one or two actors on either sides of the aisle will act out. It's because they get the money, right? They get the money for the campaigns. And all the hate and the narrative of that contributes to political money and fundraising. So I would say to not engage with that, but also allyship and supporting others to stand up for the person, to stand up against this attack of hate, to stand up against the bad behavior that's toxating our politics and our democracy. Those are my two recommendations, and I think this was a really great panel.
Thank you. I agree.
Can I just say there's a copy of this report about mindfulness in the British Parliament for you at the back if you'd like to read all about it. Thank you.
Get the plug in there. I'll hand it over to Lisa to finish this up.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
So there's a robust exchange going on from Katie from Represent Women to Carolina in Peru right now, and to Tatiana saying, we need this in Kenya. So thank you online for all this happening. I want to just give you some numbers. 6.5 million politicians in the world. That's not a huge addressable market size for any of the entrepreneurs in the room. In the US, we have around 565,000 politicians. There are less parliamentarians than would fit in a national football stadium. This is an addressable number. We can do this. And a call to action, one of a few I'm going to leave you with, is write your politician and just thank them. Say thank you for something that you agree with them. They need encouragement. I've been doing on Valentine's Day love letters to politicians, thanking them for taking the risks. Now I want you to close your eyes really quickly. I want you to imagine you just got elected. You had to spend your own money to get elected, by the way. You enter office. No one tells you the job description. You don't even know where the bathroom is. You have no staff, very little to no pay. And your colleagues are also kind of vying for your job too, okay? There's a vote on climate. It's tough and polarizing. You know it's the right thing to do. The emails start coming in. The protests start coming in. Stand up if you're gonna still vote for that cause. Stand up. Go ahead, open your eyes. Stand up if you're still gonna vote. Okay. Everyone stay standing up. Now stand up if you haven't. Yeah, in the back, basically. It's funny, the front did and the back didn't. So I wonder what's going on here in the infection size. So I want you just to, for a moment then, I want you to think of someone in your life who needs to know about what we just talked about right now. Someone with power, someone who could fund a mindfulness initiative, a journalist that could write a different story. I wanted to give you a second. And I want you to, I'm going to go around and you're going to quickly say their name. Because this is your commitment to talk to someone else about this. Okay? Suki. I'm going to go fast. Augustus.
My brother, Representative Barton.
Yay, Representative Barton. Susan.
Everyone I know.
Everyone.
Dean.
Dean.
Anthony Albanese.
Anthony. Journalist.
All the party leaders in our network.
Party leaders, yes.
My newsroom editor.
Fantastic. Newsroom editor.
Toby Kaiser and Die Welt.
Toby.
Ruth.
Ruth.
A parliamentarian I know.
Parliamentarian. Christopher. Yep, over here. Go. Martin.
Parliamentarian.
Parliamentarian.
President of University.
President of University. Wendy.
My brother.
Brother.
You want push up?
Yep.
John.
John,
So good.
Carlo,
Good.
Patrizia, Francisca,
I just have
family,
to it.
Inge, colleagues, Lila,
So easy.
fantastic. Anybody else? Hi, Vicky.
Easy to do.
Legislators, anyone else? Yeah.
We're not doing it. This is so frustrating.
Everyone on planet Earth. That's a great way. So I want you to all, you can sit back down. That's your commitment. That's for sure one thing you're going to do. And what I want to say is you can be in touch with IDG, Apolitical Foundation. This is what we do every day, is try to support politicians with the skills, mindset, and inspiration that we need. We don't have a lot of time. Robin and I were at an event the other day where a friend of ours who's a doctor says it takes 17 years for a protocol that we know that works to work its way to the medical system to become mainstream. We don't have 17 years, Jamie, for the mindfulness work to go. We have with climate, some people say 4 to 7 years before the tip is so big. So big. So when do you get to go to an event where the solution is free, it's revolutionary, and it's not even hard? It's not even hard. So with that, I want to thank all of you for coming today. Thank you for caring. And I really challenge you to be part of the solution, because I have nothing but hope with this room. So thank you, everyone.